For more than a decade, the world has been living inside an economic hologram, one that looks solid from the outside but collapses the moment you touch it. This illusion was engineered by central banks through one powerful tool: cheap money. When interest rates were pushed near zero, borrowing became effortless, risk became invisible, and money flooded the system like a broken dam. The result wasn't real growth. It was the appearance of growth, a shimmer of prosperity created by ever-inflating asset prices. Homes, stocks, crypto, luxury goods, even farmland, all became massively more expensive, not because their real value increased, but because the world was drowning in printed money. Central banks wanted to stimulate the economy, but what they really stimulated was speculation. Investments weren't driven by innovation, productivity, or value creation. They were driven by FOMO, cheap loans, and the promise that central banks would always rescue the market if anything went wrong. This is why people felt richer without earning more. Their houses appreciated, their stock portfolios grew, and companies saw record valuations even when they weren't making profits. The system rewarded owning assets, not creating anything. It rewarded investors, not workers. It rewarded risk-taking without consequences. But behind the illusion was a darker truth. The real economy stayed weak. Wages stagnated. Savings lost value. Living costs soared. And the wealth gap exploded at the fastest pace in modern history. What the world called growth was actually asset inflation disguised as prosperity, a bubble so large that it became the economy itself. And like every empire built on illusion, the asset bubble empire stands on fragile foundations. All it takes is rising interest rates or a sudden shock to expose how unstable the entire system really is. When central banks pushed interest rates to zero, and in some countries, even below zero, they unintentionally rewrote the laws of economics. Money, which was once scarce and valuable, suddenly became almost free. Borrowing cost nothing. Risk felt meaningless. And the entire financial system drifted into a strange alternate reality where asset prices could rise endlessly without any connection to real productivity. Cheap money acted like a powerful hallucinogen for the global economy. Corporations discovered that instead of innovating, improving efficiency, or creating better products, they could simply borrow billions at ultra-low rates and use that cash to buy back their own shares. Their stock prices soared, not because their businesses were healthier, but because financial engineering made them look valuable on paper. The illusion became so widespread that even failing companies appeared strong. Investors, desperate for any kind of return, poured money into everything. Overpriced real estate, risky tech startups, speculative crypto projects, even companies with no profits, no revenue, sometimes not even a real product. In a normal world, these businesses would struggle to survive, but in a zero-interest world, they became unicorns. Consumers also got pulled into the fantasy. Low mortgage rates triggered housing frenzies. Cheap loans encouraged people to spend instead of save. And governments borrowed like there was no tomorrow, adding trillions to national debts without worrying about consequences. But beneath this shiny surface lay a deeply unstable structure. When money has no cost, people stop treating it as real. They chase bubbles, inflate markets, and create entire industries built on exaggerated expectations. The zero-interest era didn't strengthen the economy. It disconnected it from reality, laying the foundation for a collapse the world still pretends isn't coming. One of the most overlooked truths about modern finance is that asset bubbles do not treat everyone equally. They create the illusion of collective wealth, but in reality, only a small group at the top truly benefits, while everyone else is left chasing rising prices. This is the core design of the asset bubble empire. The entire system rewards those who already own assets, while punishing those who don't. When central banks inject liquidity into the economy, the new money doesn't flow evenly. It moves first and fastest into financial markets, stocks, corporate bonds, real estate, and luxury assets. Wealthy investors, institutions, hedge funds, private equity firms, and multinational corporations are positioned to receive and use this money immediately. They buy assets before prices rise, capturing the full upside of the bubble. Meanwhile, the average citizen doesn't see this new money until much later. often through wage increases that lag far behind inflation or through government aid that arrives after prices have already surged. By the time everyday people enter the market, the bubble is already inflated, making every asset dramatically more expensive. Homes, land, stocks, and even basic necessities drift further and further out of reach. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle. The rich own appreciating assets. Central banks print money. Asset prices rise. The wealthy become wealthier. Everyone else becomes trapped outside the wealth-building system. This is not accidental. It's structural. The asset bubble empire is built on the principle that prosperity should be asset-based, not income-based. Your salary won't save you. Only assets will. And because few people can afford them anymore, the wealth gap deepens. In this system, economic growth becomes a mirage. It looks real on graphs and charts, but for ordinary citizens, the ladder to wealth is pulled further away every year. The bubble machine enriches a minority, while the majority is left renting the future. For decades, central banks have been trapped in a dangerous cycle. Whenever the economy slows, they inject more liquidity, lower interest rates, and pump money into the system. On paper, this looks like growth. Stock markets rise, real estate prices surge, tech companies gain billions in valuation overnight. But beneath that shiny surface lies a hollow structure, an economy where prices inflate, but productivity doesn't. This is the illusion of growth that has quietly replaced real economic progress. Instead of factories, supply chains, and innovation driving prosperity, central banks have allowed asset prices to become the primary engines of wealth. When money is cheap and abundant, investors chase anything that promises returns. This creates bubbles, first in dot-coms, then housing, then tech startups, now even in cryptocurrencies and commodities. Each bubble makes people feel richer, but none of it is based on sustainable value. It's a mirage created by financial engineering rather than genuine economic strength. The result is a new kind of economic imbalance. Wealth shifts upward to those who already own assets, while the rest of society is left behind. Wages stagnate, savings lose value, and the cost of living rises faster than income. For the average person, life becomes harder, not easier, even though the economy appears to be booming. This disconnect between the financial world and the real world is the biggest warning signal of our age. The illusion works until it doesn't. When bubbles burst, the fallout is catastrophic. Jobs vanish, markets crash, and governments scramble for rescue packages. Yet each time, instead of fixing the underlying problems, central banks inflate another bubble to cover the last one. This is the dangerous loop we now live in. An economy built on rising prices, not rising productivity, and a future increasingly dependent on financial manipulation rather than real growth. Every empire built on illusions eventually collapses, and the asset bubble economy created by central banks is no exception. For more than a decade, markets have been propped up not by genuine productivity, innovation, or real consumer demand, but by artificially cheap money. This has created a mirage of prosperity, where asset prices, stocks, real estate, bonds, rise far faster than wages, savings, or economic output. But mirages don't last forever. The first cracks appear when the cost of maintaining the illusion becomes greater than the illusion itself. Governments borrow more to keep markets alive. Central banks print more to prevent markets from falling. Investors take bigger risks to chase returns that no longer exist. This cycle keeps stretching until one small shock, like a bank failure, geopolitical conflict, or credit freeze, reveals how fragile everything truly is. When the bubble finally breaks, the consequences will be severe. Asset prices can fall 40 to 60%, wiping out trillions in fake wealth that never should have existed in the first place. Real estate markets may freeze, corporations may slash jobs, and pension systems could struggle to meet their promised payouts. Everyday people, not the bankers who engineered the system, will pay the heaviest price. But the collapse also exposes the truth. Fake money cannot produce real prosperity. Only productivity, innovation, and sustainable growth can. What dies in the crash is not the economy itself, but the illusion layered on top of it. And once the dust settles, nations are forced to rebuild on more honest foundations, because the fake economy, say, and only rule for so long before reality demands a reset.